afternoon, everybody. This is the third in a series of webinars focused on getting tourism businesses safely back to work. And this series of webinars supports the publication of the Department for the Economy and the Tourism Northern Ireland guidance documents entitled Working Safely During COVID-19 in the Visitor Economy Sector. And this was published on the 23rd of June, just last week. And a webinar on the general guidance was first aired on Friday, the 26th of June. This, for any of you who haven't already caught the general guidance webinar, is available to view on the Tourism NI website under the COVID-19 business support section. And I would encourage you to have a look at that, because it takes a lot of the general issues through and talks you through those. We've also ran a webinar on the all-important risk assessment. That was first aired yesterday and is also available to view on record, and I would encourage you to take an opportunity to look at that. It went into some detail. An expert from health and safety walked us through the different criteria and on that website, the important risk assessment. So it was very, very useful in your run into opening. The webinars have been designed and delivered by Tourism Northern Ireland as part of the Tourism Enterprise Development Programme, otherwise known as TED. So my name is Sharon Scott. I'm a Tourism Northern Ireland mentor and I'm your facilitator for today. I specialise in working with small tourism businesses and particularly around clustering and experience development. So I will facilitate the webinar series and also the live Q&A session that we'll run at the end. Today I'm joined by Victoria Williams, a business mentor specialising in attractions and entertainment venues, and she'll take you through and really develop from the general guidance seminar that we did last week when she talked through some of the issues. And hopefully by the end of the session today we'll have further unpacked and delved a bit deeper on some of the key issues facing attractions and venues as they move towards an opening date. We have some questions that have been supplied by participants in the webinar before the session today, which we will allude to, and we'll also encourage you to use the chat section. It's down at the bottom of your screen and under your Zoom setting, and submit some questions to us as we go through the presentation. I'll pick those up in a general question and answer session at the end. So they will be looked at as we move forward. So welcome, Victoria. I'll pass it on to you, who will take us through the issues on venues and attractions.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. Yes, my background is venues and attractions. I've worked and run several visitor attractions around the world, including snow centres and Kidzania and ice rinks and even theme parks as well. So I have got a good understanding of what the challenges are. I'm now here in Northern Ireland, and obviously very au fait with what the Northern Ireland market is doing as well. When I spoke earlier on in the week last week even, I gave everybody a bit of a flavour about the key issues. So if we'd like to go to the first slide, please. The key issue basically is going to be making an impression. So you will only get one chance to make a second impression. So clearly we've all opened before, we've unfortunately closed, but we do know that it's the feeling that the guests will have that is the most important. So if guests don't feel that their health and safety and social distance is your number one priority, they won't come back, and they won't tell their friends to come back either. We're seeing a shift, as I said, between the organisations now having the responsibility of the custodians of people's health, sort of shifting away from the government. So there's going to be four things I'm going to talk about today. Planning, how do you eat an elephant? People, humanising your approach. Perception, which is reality, as we all know, and the practicalities of it. So I'll be talking about all of those things in turn as we go through the presentation. Now, the key concerns that I know that are out there with everybody who's watching today, and obviously the general tourism market in Northern Ireland, is a real sort of a bit of a shock to the system. We're looking at the key concerns being the visitor projections and the demand. Clearly, the international visitor numbers, which are going to be worrying. Long-term financial viability and the cash flow now, very much of a concern for everybody with the furlough scheme finishing, etc. What is it going to cost to put in COVID-safe operations? How are we going to reconfigure. Operational effectiveness as well. It's all about the smile. If people are wearing face masks, are they going to be able to engage with guests? Assuring and maintaining guest confidence, that's going to be the big thing, a big thing about trust. So how do we deliver an excellent visitor experience within guidelines? How do we motivate and engage the staff to do it? And how do we make sure that our food and beverage operations and our retail operations are within the guidelines? I'm extremely old, as you can see, and I did actually go once on a time management course. Years ago, in the days of Filofax, it taught me two things. The first thing, which is useless now, it taught me that I should never write in pencil in my diary or in my Filofax, which clearly is very out of date. But the second thing that I've taken with me throughout my entire life is how do you eat an elephant? And it is in very small chunks, which basically means that we need to be looking at the challenge in a logical and practical way, and would be very easy to be overwhelmed by the challenge. And have we had a proactive or a reactive response to this crisis? So we need to make sure that everything is going to be planned and logical, and you can approach the challenge in an easy logical way in very small chunks. There's a lot of resources available to you, small, large, medium attractions and venues. Obviously there are a wide number of organisations locally and globally that are available, and I would urge you to read as much as possible and have them as much support out there. There's no new idea, everybody has done something before, and everybody can approach things in the same or different ways depending on how large or small their businesses are. Obviously there's all of this continued support for the tourism businesses, which is the dedicated support helpline, etc. And Sharon's going to talk about the other elements that are available to you in this environment. But there are a lot of other governing bodies, IAPA, Hospitality Ulster, ALVA, the ABALPA, all of which you may well be familiar with, and they've got extremely good COVID-19 advice and helplines and resources available like risk assessments, etc. The three main things, if you saw Gary McFarlane's a webinar earlier on yesterday even about risk assessment, it's basically all about three things, and that is infection control and prevention of onward transmission, rebuilding the public confidence, and that is through a holistic risk assessment which is split into the manageable sections, the elephant that I was talking about. I have a suggestion, and I think Gary also mentioned the same thing. Once you've gone through the guidelines, look at the guidelines and go through it line by line about how that will affect you in your business, and then look about having a control measure that then is applicable in your business. Clearly, you will have to look at cleaning regimes, social distancing, to PPE or not to PPE. That is the question. Obviously, managing our guests, workforce management, how we actually put everybody together with rotas, etc., and looking at the service procedures as well, and how we actually engage with our guests in a safe manner. I put together a checklist that might aid your planning process. It's basically a bit of a practical guide. It's going through the guidelines as they're laid out with the headings on the left, and then looking at all the different controls, the appropriate controls that might actually manage that risk within your business. Some of it may not be applicable to your business, but it will give you a good broad outline of how to approach the challenge and how then to look at the detail. And I've also put some best practice on there as well. And as we go through this presentation, I'll be sharing some best practice from all over the world, some little hints and tips, and maybe some sort of quite interesting stories about how people have approached certain elements of that risk assessment. But as I said, this will give you a really good start point, if you haven't already, to go through and actually look at your business in fine detail, and about how you actually then approach the risk assessment, and then what control measures you'll need to put in, and therefore how you'll need to change your standard operating procedures, and how you'll be able to to develop your business still within the COVID-19 process. I'll give you an example. There's an element there on workforce management. Would you benefit from having longer opening times, shorter opening times? Would you basically then have longer or shorter shifts? You'll be able to put in your rotas so people don't overlap, etc., etc. Do you, for instance, need to have everybody working at the moment within your business? Could you put the admin people still working from home? Would there be marketing or admin or finance, etc., that would need to come in? There are elements there that you can think, well, actually, it is safer if they stay at home working from home, and that system is working at the moment. So again, just basically thinking outside the box. You don't have to do what you've always done. You can challenge it and look at it in this scenario now. We are fortunate in a way that we are slightly behind the recovery, if you like, in other areas of the world. And yeah, we will obviously look at from our local community what we're all doing here, but also around the world, globally, internationally. There are some real good ideas that people have grasped, and also we sort of can see and learn from their experience. Now, the reason I put a pound sign on there is that there are 1,000,001 people, I'm sure, that are calling you, that are LinkedIn you, they're messaging you, they're trying to get in touch with you to sell you every innovation imaginable. And I think, again, we spoke about this in Gary's section yesterday about risk assessments. We need to make sure that these sort of things are going to be necessary in your specific business. So don't think that you have to do what people are telling you to do. There are huge amounts of solutions on ticketing methods, and people that are coming in there looking at guest engagement ways of doing it, all digitising that guest environment. Now, there may well be things that you can do. There may well be things that were useful to you. But I'll give you an example. In America, I've heard of an attraction that's now spent $240,000 installing a new no-touch toilet facility. Now, $240,000 is a lot of money in anybody's book, but for something that potentially could have been resolved through hand sanitizer and social distancing, one does wonder where on earth that decision came from. So the things don't have to cost huge amounts, and I would really urge you, before you actually think, oh well, we could use that, have a look at your risk assessment, go through it line by line and see if that resolves the problem, and that is desperately needed. So temperature checks, all sorts of big technologies that are coming out now, you may well not need. You can probably deal with them in the safe way, as Gary was suggesting, with the social distancing regimes, the standard operating regimes, hand sanitizing, and obviously hand washing facilities for your staff and for your guests. Now, we're all worried about the commercial implications and the business sustainability. We know that every control measure and every additional control on your risk assessment will have some kind of commercial implication. So as we go through, you'll be looking at the art of the possible, you're looking at your revenue implications, your reduced capacity, throughput, repeat business, ticketing, and obviously with the paramount thing on safety. Now, you will know your own business, and obviously everybody's been talking in the last few weeks about the 2 metre and the 1 metre and the capacity, etc. You will know your business, you will know line by line basically how much revenue you get from certain revenue streams. I would urge you to look at each revenue stream and see how that's going to be impacted. Some people will be forecasting that they're operating at 70% business, some people may say 30%, some people may say 50%. Each of those revenue streams will then contribute to your business model. Knowing your business model inside out is the key to this, because you need to know which areas of your business are going to be suffering the most, basically the opportunities the most, and then you can then scale your business in order to produce those revenue streams and maximize those revenue streams. So for instance, capacity management is a big thing, and obviously now people are saying book in advance, and I know that's going on in the whole world now. Everybody's booking in advance slots, making sure the capacity management is there. But you could actually think about, well, do I need to open every day? Do I need to have the same opening times as I had before? Do I need to stretch them? Because my peak might well be actually able to then go down into my social my shoulder sessions, I can't say that, get my teeth in, and that way then you can then spread out who would have been coming anyway, and maybe you won't be losing as much as you might think. So have a look and see. For instance, you need to maximise the income from the business that's coming in. Perhaps the demographics will have changed. I'm sure they will have when we look at basically, are we attracting the older people now? Maybe the grandparents and what have you might well not feel safe to come out. So maybe we need to be certainly short, medium, and long term looking at the different demographics over the coming months. Weston-super-Mare Pier, for instance, is opening this Saturday, and they have managed to look at all of their business and seen exactly where the slot machines will need to be done, hand sanitising with the cash handling, etc. They've looked at all of their rides, what can be operated safely within the social distancing rules. They've actually said that they're opening all parts of their business apart from 2 enclosed attractions. And they're advertising for part-time staff. And speaking on the webinar, as the manager was the other day, the beach was packed, obviously, and nothing was open, and they know that there is that pent-up demand, and they're able to service it, and they're able to do that within the boundaries. On a larger scale, over in America, China, the Atlantis in China has obviously opened their water park up, but only to hotel guests. So hotel guests who are spending money on hotel accommodation and all the ancillaries are the only people that can go into the water park because the capacity has been reduced so much. So it's maximising that income from those people that are coming through your door and knowing that you can then service that. So you're adding value, but also you're maximising the average spend. So cost implications. Well, I mentioned before, obviously we all know that payroll probably is our biggest cost apart from maybe rent, and that payroll needs obviously to be, our cloth needs to be cut according to our new capacity. And obviously we need to be very careful about making sure that we've got the right number of people in the right place, but also we obviously be very, very mindful of that cost. We might be increasing our costs because we need more people, herding people, maybe greeting people, explaining things to people. So we might need to have a look at that. And that's when I do say, look at your opening times, look at your shift times, see how you can actually engage your staff in a good way to make sure that they're servicing the people when they need to be serviced. So you probably need to look at pathways through your attraction, see where you actually do need people, where you don't need people. As I say, you don't need to do what you did before. We're in a completely different space. We also don't need as much new equipment potentially as we might do. There's a World War II museum in New Orleans that was completely, dumbstruck by the fact that they had most of their attractions are actually interactive, so they're touch. So and they were looking at huge investment in changing the software, changing the hardware, barriers, putting things in, training for the staff. And then some bright spark came up with the idea maybe of just giving somebody a 6-cent stylus that then they could use throughout the attraction and nobody touches anything. So that is an absolutely prime example of how you can look at things in a slightly different way and not need to spend huge amounts of money. And that stylus apparently is being used for people to open lifts and obviously for all other things, cash point machines, etc. So it's a really good example of not having to do too much. And look at your consumables. If you are going to be giving masks out, for instance, that's going to cost money. Do you need to? Do you need to look at sort of one single use? Obviously, clearly we were trying to reduce single use plastics and single use paper, etc. But maybe we're going to have to do that. So you need to be looking at that, how much you're actually going to be needing to spend on those consumables and building them into your new policies and procedures and your SOPs. Looking at opportunities. I mentioned short, medium and long-term business strategies. It's very easy to become completely bogged down with the negatives, but there are positives out there. And I mentioned earlier, is your crisis response a proactive one or a defensive one? Clearly we have to be defensive. but we are in control of our own future. You might think that it's sort of the new bright sparks that start looking at the opportunities, but certainly not necessarily in the case of the venerable All England Lawn Tennis Club, which you may or may not know. Obviously, Wimbledon should be live at the moment. We should be watching everybody playing tennis, one of my favourite sports. But unfortunately, they can't. But you may not be aware that after the 2004 SARS outbreak, Wimbledon took out a special insurance policy which specialised in pandemics, and therefore, whilst all the other businesses at the moment, the Olympics and all the big sporting venues are really suffering, Wimbledon have just had a £114 million payout. Now, I'm not suggesting that we suddenly go and insure against another pandemic, but what I'm saying is that there are opportunities out there if we think a little bit more long term and we look at potentially thinking outside the box. So I mentioned the new demographics, and I looked at sort of the short, medium and long term. Again, you need to be identifying, have your budget obviously set to where you know the businesses are coming in. There are many venues out there, especially events venues and indoor spaces, that are saying the London market at the moment, they're saying that there's not going to be a market until 2021 for events, and obviously indoor catering events, big sort of conferences, etc. And even they were saying that the Christmas party business, which is obviously very big, in the corporate land, it's going to be similar to the advent after 2008. The big crash where nobody really was in the mood to party. So there's quite a lot of things that impact various people's businesses that you might need to think of. Well, actually, that is going to impact my business. Therefore, it's pointless me planning for a big Christmas. It's pointless me planning until next spring. How do I batten down the hatches and survive until then? So it's a short, medium and long-term strategy. It's all about people. I mentioned about humanising the approach when I was talking last week. And it is all about people. Everything is about how you engage with people, be it your team, be it your leadership team, be it your wider team, be it your contractors, and then obviously your customers or your guests. And that's about engagement. Okay, and I'd like people to think a little bit outside the box now on how you can engage people. Okay. Now, you weren't expecting a bit of interaction, but I'm going to have some interaction with you if it kills me. So, pick up your post-it note or a piece of paper from your desk. I want everybody to do this, please. It's very important. There's going to be a poll. And I'd like you to scrunch that piece of paper up into a small ball. And then what I'd like you to do is throw it at your laptop or your screen, even your phone, and tell me exactly which colour you hit. I missed completely, I missed the laptop. So there's going to be a poll now come up on your screen, and I want you to tell me what you hit. Did you hit the yellow, the red, the blue, the black, or the white? Or did you miss entirely? I must admit, I haven't got a section for that, so I'm not actually covered. So the reason I'm doing this is to try and get people to understand that there's lots of different creative ways of engaging people. So carry on and throw away. I should have got some music to do this while you did it. I don't want any claims for any damaged laptops, please. I'm hoping that your paper is not going to be filled with any sort of marbles or anything like that. So have a look and see. I missed completely, so I'm going to say white. And then hopefully we should have a poll come up and tell everybody how everybody has done, and also how, right, blue, fantastic. So we've got the results of the poll, 18% yellow, 24% red, 41% blue, nobody hit the black, and 18% hit the white, which is probably including me, who actually missed completely. Well, that's interesting, nobody actually hit the middle. Oh, yes, yellow, so 18%, yes, indeed. So did we get people lying, do you think? Do you think everybody lied? I don't think they did, because they're saying 41%. Thanks for that. That's just a little bit of fun, and it's proving that there's people out there, and it's proving that we're all interacting with each other. I know that we're yearning for some interaction in this virtual world at the moment, and hopefully that's given you a little bit, get your creative juices flowing about how potentially you can engage with people and actually think outside the box a little bit on what to do, because it's a virtual world out there. We're deeply hungry for engagement and interaction, which is why hopefully our businesses, our attractions business and our venues are going to be, servicing an awful lot of pent-up demand. I mentioned about humanising every decision. We need to be, very, very conscious of our guest journey, and also how we actually feel in every element of that guest journey and every element of what we're servicing to the guest. So I mentioned about, approaching it in a logical way. The risk assessment, very small chunks, look at it in a logical way, but also look at it how everybody would feel. So the guest experience, the journey and the touch points. At every stage, how will the guest feel? At the start of the journey, the guest might be rather nervous, not knowing what to expect. So perhaps you can think about maybe making sure that they know what to expect by communicating with them well in advance. Things are going to be very different. People are going to be very uncomfortable probably, and they're not going to know quite what to expect. How will the guest feel? And the training and the new standard operating procedures, how will it feel to be a member of the team delivering those? It's incredibly important, because everything has to come from our team. Our team are our cold face. Our team are the people that are in front of the guests every single day. They know what it's going to feel like to actually deliver the service in a new way. So you need to be consulting them at every single stage. So I would urge you to keep it practical, keep it simple, and instill trust in every element of the decisions that you make. My favourite book, it is outdated. It's been in print since 1940 odd. It is an incredible book. I would urge you to read it if possible, but it's about how to win friends and influence people. The team has to be your first priority. You have to be training and supporting your team to deliver the service in a new way. I think our organisational leadership is going to have to change in this new normal. We are going to be going away from this sort of command and control type of culture into a far more human type of leadership experience. We're looking now at the mental health of our team. You need to, have a compelling reason. So this is now a compelling reason to change the way that we lead our team, to change and connect with our team in a new way. And, exhibit that humility that is so important in any sort of leadership, because we are all learning in this environment, and we need to be respecting our team to make sure that they're doing it. We are asking them to do something that they are comfortable with. So it's all about this leadership. It's all about engaging your team and developing those plans collaboratively with your team and engaging them in the challenge. Sort of, we're all in this together. And as I said, if you haven't read that book, it's not just a mantra for work life. It is a mantra for how to work in just a human environment. So it's a great book to read. I highly recommend it. So yes, just being accountable, making sure people are accountable and know what they have to do and engaged in that challenge. We may have small teams, we may have large teams. If you've got a small team, then you're probably the expert. They're going to be your experts. I know that the art of leadership is to have experts around you that are better at things than you are. I think that's absolutely the case. So you need to be sharing that load and actually saying, okay, you're the expert in this. What would you do? How would we approach this? What should we do? This is the problem. So have a working group and share that load, this elephant that I've been speaking about, and delegate and make sure that those people know exactly what they're accountable for. Who is accountable for? What are they accountable for? When are they going to do it? Why and when? And obviously, project manage the project, but also be involved in the project at every stage of the business and make sure people actually then know that they have So yeah, they have your support in every element of it. And if they come to you, they can trust you to be honest, and you can say, actually, that's something we haven't thought about. How are we going to approach it? So it's really, really important. So there's lots of things potentially that we'll need to be looking at, specifically the practicalities. Things like audio guides. What are we going to do? Do we need to sanitize them? What about the high touch areas? I mentioned about the stylus, for instance. That again could be a very easy way of resolving an issue that you might think that you have in your business. And so you need to engage and empower the team to actually deliver this plan that you're going to be putting in, or you are already putting in. So the next slide will then go into some of the best practice around the world. So you'll see there is somebody in the Disney theme park there with a mask on. Whether or not we go down that route, I think we are sort of saying that masks are actually only sort of really protecting people against actually spreading the disease, rather than as a practical way of actually putting something in one of the control measures. However, there may well be a place for masks. If there is a place for masks and some of your team members want to actually wear masks, obviously we will allow them to do that. We don't want them to come into an unsafe environment, or their perception is an unsafe environment. So there may well be then issues that come up about how you then communicate with a member of our guests with a mask on. And I know that that goes all down to training. So, for instance, you can then look at it as a training, and then I know that there are attractions that actually have eyebrow training sessions about how to communicate with your eyebrows. We talk about body language, now we have eyebrow language. So again, and other ways of actually overcoming that is actually to have a picture of your face on your chest, so that people can actually see who they're talking to. So again, we've got some best practices that are happening already. You'll see in the middle there's social distancing on theme park rides, and again about sanitizing rides, at what sort of stage, how often do you have to clean them, how often do you have a break in the day. Again, there's a lot of recommendations on a lot of the attractions governing bodies. And it's incredibly important that you read those and you can see what's going to be appropriate for your business and how you can then get that risk to a minimal level, and then still obviously have people visiting your attractions and using your facilities. On the right there, one of the aquariums, again, they look at language and the signage. I mean, clearly signage is having to be in place, and to sort of say no touch, I think is obviously very negative, but I think what they've found in this particular aquarium, which is Loveland Aquarium in the States, they've actually put, this is a high touch area, caution, high touch area. So rather than saying do not touch and being very sort of unfriendly, if you like, this is a high touch area, and then obviously having hand sanitizing stations around it so that people can then sanitize their hands after using it if they have to use it. But that's when the styluses and other methods potentially could come along as well. And mentioning about communications, yes, I mean, these obviously show how we can actually communicate with people through signage, but one of the big things that's come out of people actually already having opened is that having the right people at the beginning of your attraction is absolutely paramount. So again, you'll need to be training those people on what to do, how to welcome people. People will be feeling rather very sort of trepidatious about how they approach and how they're coming in. They're desperate to get out and about, but obviously this is a whole new world. So we need those people, your key members of your team, to be at the front, reassuring people and making sure that they're confident in what they're saying. On that also, it's worth mentioning that we've got some stats already that are beginning to come out, and what we're finding is that 75% of people are actually doing what they should be doing, and for the other 25%, they think that it's all over and they can behave and what have you as they like. So you may well get some conflict, because your team will need to feel empowered to be able to manage those guests, that 25% of guests that aren't actually complying with your regulations. And that is going to be difficult, because clearly they want to come to an attraction to help to enjoy it, and obviously interact with people and interact with your attraction. But they need to be told and they need to be approached in the right way. So that is some training that potentially you will need to instill in your people to make them confident that they can actually manage people. So our guests need to understand that they also have a part to play. And again, that could come into the communication prior on your website, on your booking forms, on everything about how we expect our guests to behave within our premises. So again, we don't want to be confrontational, but that needs to be very much part of your training so that you can get people to actually understand how they're going to approach people that aren't actually doing what they're asking them to do. Perception is reality. That's one of my favourite phrases. If somebody thinks something is the way it is, then that is their perception, and as far as they're concerned, it is right. So again, the perception of your team, the perception of your guests, you need to be very mindful of their thoughts and put yourselves in their shoes. There may well be some members of your team who are fearful of coming back to work, and the perception out there is that it's still unsafe. Again, there's a word that's just come out of FOGO, fear of going out. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, but that is something that's very live at the moment. Obviously, fear of going out from our guests is a clear barrier to our business, but have a think about your team as well. So consistent, honest and clear communication to your team, that has got to be the key, because your team have to understand that you're doing stuff to keep them safe. I think we can talk about what we're going to communicate out to the guests to reassure them to come back into our business, but maybe we need to think first about how we are engaging our team. The furlough scheme is coming to an end. Some people are now coming back to work part-time, etc. The furlough scheme allows us to do that. But how have you been engaging with your team prior to them coming back to work? And don't just expect them to walk through the door and everything's rosy. They might be fearful. They might be they might think that they've got childcare issues, or with the schools, etc., being off. There may well be some elements of their lives that have changed since they finished work. So we need to be mindful of that. But all you can do is be constant and consistent and honest and clear to maintain that staff engagement and to understand that things might change. My daughter, I live in Donegal, and my daughter works at Pier 36, the restaurant pub on the front there, and she's been furloughed, and they've been in touch with her over the course of the last few weeks, and she's been really happy, and she's going in today to help them clean and then getting everything ready for opening. So they've been really, really good, and they're putting her on courses, and the COVID-19 courses from Hospitality Ulster. I've been lucky enough to be going through those as well with her, and that's really, really good. It's engaging her back into that business and understanding that things are going to be different, and giving her the wherewithal to make sure that she knows what to do when she's actually serving tables, etc. So again, we need great leadership. We need really good training with your team, and let them know what you're doing to keep them safe. We just don't want to be just aiming our communication solely at our guests. But our guests are clearly very important as well. And again, that's somewhere actually you can learn an awful lot with what's gone on already. Clear, timely communications to promote engagement and that trust and that confidence and that brand loyalty. Use of social media, marketing and promotion strategy. You can build on the message that safety is our number one priority. This is what you're doing, what we are doing, how we're doing it, when we're doing it, who we're doing it to. So yeah, please make sure that you've got that plan. And I'm sure the larger businesses have already got that button down, but the smaller businesses may well benefit from looking at what the larger businesses have done. And this is what some of the larger businesses have done. The Titanic, hello Titanic, your confidence charter is there, an excellent example of how you can build confidence to make sure that people are actually knowing what to expect when they come in to your business. I think you're a case in point there. There's Edinburgh Zoo there, they've got a live webcam. There's a number of zoos and aquaria that have got live webcams to sort of encourage people. Merlin have been saying that the most engagement that they've had during lockdown is with their aquarium, and apparently 150,000 live streams of animals in aquarium on the London South Bank. So yeah, that shows that there are lots of people, wanting to look at things, and hopefully will come in. Chester Zoo again have done an awful lot, you're probably aware of media coverage, etc. And fortunately they were allowed to open, and that worked. But there are things there that you can then be communicating to your guests now to build that confidence and build that brand loyalty back up. Alton Towers there on the left there too. I heard that there was a caravan park recently that has got a dog webcam, which has got the point of view of the caravan park from a dog's eye view, which again sort of builds up people, what to expect, and also obviously being pet friendly. That's obviously a big part. But yeah, great sort of engagement there, and a good opportunity to sort of engage with people before they come into your business, and they're confident when they arrive. So some final thoughts. Gary actually said this, and I love this quote. It's a C.S. Lewis quote. We can't go back and change the beginning, but we can start where we are and change the ending. I mentioned before, and we all should be aware that this digitalisation of everything, it is very impersonal. This virtual world that we're living in is extremely isolating. There is a great sort of pent up want for sort of experiences. There's a hunger for people to actually interact with one another. So I think the socialization and sort of visual stimulation is very pent up, and we are here as Attractions in order to do it. Clearly, it will be for the local market, the majority, and our short term should really be looking at the local market and actually servicing that pent-up demand. So there is some good news out there. It has put us in a great place. We also, some other good things as well. I'm a very positive person, probably, but I really do want people to sort of really also feel proud, because we've all dealt with this incredibly well. We've all had our ups and our downs, but our businesses, especially in Northern Ireland, I think have been really quick to adapt, and I think generally the human condition, the positivity of the human condition has come out. So there are some sort of positives there. We need to be looking at the guidance, because it's changing all the time. You probably noticed there's some things that changed yesterday, and so please do look at the guidance, because it might give you another avenue of opportunity, of something that maybe you thought wasn't possible, and an attraction, part of an attraction that you thought wasn't able to open, can actually open under some new guidelines. So keep an eye on those guidelines. Engage and support your team. I mentioned about advancing and sort of making sure the communication is there. Engage and support your guests. Clearly, let them know what to expect, and really keen to humanise everything, because the landscape has completely changed, and as long as you keep it human, then hopefully we will succeed.
Thank you very much, Victoria. It was actually a very positive and uplifting presentation as we approach Friday, and thank you for that. You've your positivity and your idea of humanising this whole situation is really quite inspiring for businesses as they move towards opening. So I hope it actually has helped everybody's nerves a bit, as was your intention, just to look through. And we've had a lot of questions coming through, with some questions, as I said before the webinar today. And actually what we're doing each day this week is we're building a series of information and in depth. There was a long discussion this morning and yesterday about the whole issue around maybe toilet procedures. Again, back to this humanizing everything. There's nothing more important than where do you go to the loo and how does that happen? And I know something that again today has come through about the toilet procedures. So Victoria, can we start off with that very human condition about how do we go to the loo?
Well, again, when we spoke yesterday about risk assessment, you need to look at your own specific areas, and make sure that each individual cubicle and each individual pathway and sink, etc., can be a social distance. And if it can't be, then obviously you'll have to restrict the numbers that go in and the cleaning regimes. It's all about hand washing. It's all about the regimes. An interesting thing that Gary actually said yesterday, which I've sort of taken up, is the fact that if you think about hand gel and the use of hand gel, then it negates the need for drying. So you don't then have the problem of hand towels and consumables. So there's a lot of sort of best practice that's been coming out that way. Clearly, with toilets, you have got sinks, and therefore you don't necessarily, you will have the problem of drying. But certainly, if you've got hand dryers rather than towels or whatever, then again you need to be looking at what the local guidelines are saying about the individual toilet procedures. But certainly, you have to be able to maintain that social distance and maintain those surfaces that are being touched, and keeping it to a level of cleanliness and sanitisation at every stage. That is going to be probably where you're going to put your most members of staff, because you will need to herd people, you'll need to put them on at certain times. It's not going to be the nicest job, but obviously it's a very, very important, it's a very, very key, because even before this all came out, I think toilets have been so key to a guest experience. If you look on TripAdvisor about the number of times toilets are mentioned, then it's a real measure of an attraction's success is how its toilets are perceived. So it is something that cannot go wrong. You have to make sure you've got that going, as a very first priority.
Yeah, and I think that again in the risk assessment webinar was well covered about how everybody's actual physical toilet block and toilet facilities are so different. It's something that has to be looked at very carefully in the all-important risk assessment, and it's an individual decision as opposed to there is specific guidelines of how you do that. It's something that you've got to consider in your own risk assessment and mitigation measures. So thank you for that. We'll move on. Related to that, actually, we've covered the P. Now we'll move to the T. How people then in various attractions and venues, they want a cup of tea, they want a drink, they want sort of, whether that be just some small food things. How you approach that now in the new normal? It may not be what was offered before, but how do we look at catering facilities?
I think catering facilities, obviously there are guidelines specifically for food and beverage, and one of those big things is that we should have no communal buffets anymore. We should have nowhere where people help themselves. If you do have a business that has a restaurant facility, then clearly there are real key guidelines for that. But tea and coffee, etc., that was obviously used to be handled, and you had a little pot and you went through the tea bags and you decided which one you want. That's completely out. So it has to be individually. You could either serve it individually with the tea bag in it, or you can then say what kind of tea would you like, and then give them one tea bag to go with the hot water. We cannot have people going to communal stations and choosing their milk and getting their sugar, etc. It has to be served direct to the customer, be it takeaway or to the table. And obviously the table comes with its own individual guidelines as well. Yes, it's one of my favourite pastimes, drinking tea, and I'm going to have to make sure that tea and coffee facilities I take with me, I think.
Yeah, and that's the other option. And it's back to the idea of communicating with your visitors, maybe some that have been with you before and they're expecting to find themselves availing of a full lunch facility. Maybe that's not what is available currently. And maybe it will something you can get to as you move along, but just communicating to the visitors of exactly what is available in the venue, and particularly where that is different from what has gone before.
Yeah, I think just on that, so Sharon, sorry to interrupt there. I think on that, there's an awful lot of really good best practice that's in the hospitality industry now with virtual tours and people walking you through. so that people know exactly what to expect. I think the worst thing you can do is to come in and sort of feel really uncomfortable in a new environment. So loads of questions, loads of answers, virtual things, and having that webcam, and this is what we're doing now, and just for those people who visited us before, this is how we're doing things differently. There's a lot to be said for getting that sort of engagement. And again, thinking about the demographic, because if you're going to be looking at slightly older people, maybe those older people won't be watching those webcams and doing that. So how do you actually get in touch with them and get that information across? So it's really sort of being very aware of where your revenue lines are coming in and how you actually communicate to those people effectively.
Okay, thank you very much. And there is a specific webinar on hospitality, which Colin Neal will be running through some of those specific questions tomorrow afternoon. It's about 3:15 tomorrow afternoon if you've got specific issues around the hospitality issue. There's a few questions coming in here, and you have mentioned the idea of limiting the physical handling of money, and we've heard a lot of that. Can you give us some recommendations on that? And again, this is pre-visit and during visit, just around handling of cash and cards.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously everywhere now is advising that it should be cashless, but there are elements of areas that you cannot be. For instance, pushes on amusement arcades, and obviously some amusement machines, the older ones, etc., don't take the cards yet, and also the hand sanitizing, around fruit machines, etc., and also our team. So our team, if they're going to be handling money, will have a protocol about when they take cash, and obviously hand sanitizing every time they actually take cash and pop it into the tray. Certainly cash is obviously reduced hugely these days, but certainly with some sort of cash environments, as I said, like amusement arcades, there is no way that we can't do that. So having really visible, really accessible hand sanitizing stations and recommendations, and our team can be trained. If you're walking around an amusement arcade and you sort of see people do certain things, our team need to be trained to be able to advise our guests how to actually behave, what they need to be doing. And obviously signage is good, but people don't tend to read signs a lot of the time. You need to be really training your team to be able to keep our customers and our guests sort of aligned to what we've already promised. So, again, communication in advance, saying if you're going to be coming to use our amusements, or if you're going to be using cash, this is what we need. Obviously we don't want to be turning people away if they've got cash, so we'll need to have some kind of protocol to do it, but it will be very different to how it was before.
Oh, okay. Another question's come in, and there was such a long discussion yesterday in the risk assessment webinar about face masks versus visors, and the whole issue about how visitors are perceiving these. Do they see this as a comfort? Is it something, oh yes, we're being safe? And we explored, and we took a real deep dive into the legislation and the guidelines around this. And the guidelines are clearly saying that in general, face masks and visors are not required unless it's identified in your risk assessment. Examples of when that could come into play is when you cannot be seen to mitigate, you have no mitigating measures, and you can't operate within that 1 metre social distancing guideline that is currently in place. Then you need to look, and again, it's down to individual businesses to look at this as part of the risk assessment, as how they treat the whole idea of face masks versus visors. I certainly learnt a lot yesterday from Gary about the difference between the visors and the face masks, and I would encourage you to go and check out that part of the webinar if that's something you want to take further interest in. But it was interesting. So this question, Victoria, is specifically around the idea of, in your experience, do visitors see this as a comfort, or is it maybe more off-putting? So how do you look at that in terms of customer relations and customer confidence and trust?
Well, if you look around the world at what's happening in the theme parks, and a lot of the theme parks are now issuing face masks to people when they come in, and they're allowing certain elements. If people want a photograph taken with the family, then they're allowed to take it off, but again, they're training everybody on how to actually to handle if people have them around because people are wearing around the chins, or people aren't wearing them at all, and again, they have to be trained. I mean, the perception there, I believe, is in general that it's actually a good thing because people are being kept safe. Because I think we all know, as I said before, that the face mask actually predominantly only protects the people that you're with. It doesn't actually offer very much protection for yourself. So if you've got it, then you won't hopefully spread it as much. Now, I think as long as you've communicated to your guests that this is what's expected and communicated why that it's there, then I think that it is a good thing. Here, though, I think because the perception, there's also the risk, and I think Gary mentioned this as well, that people could be lulled into a false sense of security, and then the reduction, then people maybe won't wash their hands. People might think that it's especially when wearing gloves. I think Gary was also saying that people are sort of lulled into a false sense of security because the virus can survive on gloves just as much as it can survive on skin. So you need to be thinking about your risk assessment, what specifically is going to be appropriate for your business and your demographic, you see, because the older demographic may well feel that actually it's a more confidence boosting thing to have somebody in a visor or whatever. The younger element of our business may well think that it's off-putting, I'm not going to go there because they've all got face masks on. I think perhaps you could test the water with some of your guests, see what your guests think before you actually make that decision, or start with a particular process and then see how it goes. Again, learn from others and learn and discuss it with people, and discuss it with your team as well. As I said, humanise everything. How is it going to feel for a team member to have to wear a face mask? What's the benefit of that, and will it actually outweigh the risk? And again, Gary was talking about looking at ways maybe of avoiding the need to mitigate that meeting, where it's not possible to have that metre or 2 metre distance. Then if you think, well, actually, all we need to do is put people side by side rather than face to face. So we've done something already there that's a physical change, but it's just basically put people in different places to actually avoid the need for use of face masks. And as I mentioned as well, if you do feel that they are right, you can't then you can do this eyebrow training about how to interact with people, maybe put your face on your chest. There are ways of sort of mitigating that, and the use of visors as well. I think certainly in the food service area, I personally feel safer when somebody's got a visor on, but that's just me. I don't know whether other people feel the same, but I think it is for my protection more than theirs in my view. But again, it's how people judge it. I think visors are better in many ways because obviously you can see people's faces. So again, it will depend very much on your business, but I would advise people to talk to people and try to get some indication of what their people or their guests may well think if they put them into their own personal attractions.
Yeah. And I think that was a good point that Gary raised yesterday in the risk assessment, and just leading on to what you've said there about your risk assessment. You should sit down with your staff at least weekly, and particularly in the beginning as your operation, and reassess everything, and things like that would come up in the conversation, and you would get a feel as you went along. And the risk assessment is not a one-off process. It's very much an evolving process, and will be for some time to come. So thanks for that. Going to move now to, there's questions coming in from people, obviously from maybe a museum background, an exhibit. And again, it's about this idea of, we were always very keen on interaction, people been having a chance to touch and feel things in exhibits, that sort of thing. And obviously that's now going to be somewhat changed. So you've given us a great example of the stylus, which was a lovely, simple thing. People are really concerned about this customer experience and how they encourage people and educate people about the whole idea for the exhibits and interact, and how this is different from before.
Well, I think we can learn a lot from retail here, because a lot of retail. I mean, if you've been in the shops recently, you know, there's signs there, so browse with your eyes. You know, there's a few things there that, you know, perhaps we could learn from what people are doing at the moment, and obviously sort of sanitising, etc. after use. With exhibits, etc., I do think that yeah, people will want to, you know, touch and feel. But I think, again, if you've communicated well enough in advance through your booking, if people are booking earlier, you know, sorry, if people are booking their slots, and you've got a lot of opportunities of explaining how things are going to be before people actually get into your business, then hopefully people will understand that, you know, people are not allowed to touch certain things. And as I mentioned before, and I think you saw from the aquarium, you know, if you do have an element of areas that are touching, you need to be, you know, making sure that you've got sanitised stations around it, and also it's saying high touch area, you know, so people are understanding and managing their own risk. And I think it's all about staff training. So, you know, people knowing what to expect to begin with, but then as you come in, you know, your first interaction with your first member of staff, you know, the second, etc., is managing that expectations and understanding that there's a reason for it. And I went before as well about, I said before about the guests actually having a responsibility too. So that's obviously being on your website, on your booking, you know, on the printout or the mobile app, to say, you know, please note these exhibits will not be allowed to be touched, etc. So, you know, and explain exactly what you've done in order to, you know, what you've done differently, and how they're going to add value without having to be touched. You know, explain the reasons why. Again, trust and honesty, you know, you just need to be transparent all the way through. But yeah, staff training, I think, and basically just honesty and communication at the earliest possible opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Victoria. Just to round things off as well, and again, to flag up some further sources of information, very detailed discussions around the whole idea of the cleansing regimes, how we keep places clean, what kind of equipment and lotions, and, you know, I personally learned so much about the whole cleansing regime and the difference in your domestos and some of the high grade cleansers. So I know there is detailed guidance which is available. It was flagged up by Gary yesterday, and he was able to comment on a very useful document which can be made available to this webinar today, on specifically around what sort of equipment you need. You know, again, we flagged up yesterday and you've reiterated that today, Victoria, about not going too far down the line of investing lots of money in new equipment at this stage. And I think if you look at Gary's webinar under the risk assessment, where we went into that in more detail than we've got time for today, it actually helped you know, quell a few nerves and address a lot of queries on this specific issue. And he was very, very good on that. So I would refer you to have a look at the webinar, and also the further information around what type of equipment and procedures you need to put in place for the all-important cleansing. We know this is a worrying time. There's lots to think about. It's coming upon us very, very quickly. And even now, as we go through the reopening, and as Victoria has reiterated through her presentation, how that will change and how you will have to adapt and develop your procedures as you go along. There will be a dedicated Tourism NI business support helpline available. It's open between Mondays and Fridays, 10 to 5 p.m. The number is on the screen, and will be again available through the business support web hub. This will allow you to access experts in the field, whether it be health and safety, risk assessment, the various people that are involved in the webinars. So you will be met by a very helpful person at the end of the line. If they can't answer your query immediately, because it's very specific and will require some expert advice, they will come back to you within 24 hours with the advice from the expert themselves. So there's a little network of people sitting in behind the frontline staff in Tourism Northern Ireland to help you with those specific questions as you go through the next weeks and months ahead. So do check that out. Also have a look, if you haven't already, at the Tourism NI, the support web hub. That was a great source of information as we moved through the whole grants, furlough scheme, all that. It's now moving towards reopening and how we get businesses back and trading again. So that's available around covid19.tourismni.com, and I'm sure many of you on the webinar today are very familiar with this site, but just to highlight how it's changed its focus going forward. We've talked in quite a lot about the different webinars that we've been running this week, and they're all building on each other. Although they're sector specific, there is issues that you feel that you can dip in and out. They do operate as live webinars, but they're also held on the support web hub for you to view at leisure, and then home in and specific elements, some of those which we talked today. There's best practice, there's little hints and tips around cleansing, there's reference to further information, whether it be a food service or the toilets or anything else that we've talked about, and you can have a look at some of the questions and answers that were raised in those particular webinars. There's a few more coming tomorrow. There's one specifically around tour guiding, led by Roz Newlands, which will be very interesting in how you take visitors round. That may be applicable to attractions who are actually leading guests around the premises, and Victoria talked a bit about that today. So that's a useful one. Then we also have Colin Neal from Hospitality Ulster, and he's going to do a sector-specific round the whole hospitality and the specific guidelines towards that. So any of you operating with food service will find that particularly useful. Janice Galt will also do one for specifically around hotels, and if any of you are working with hotels, you might find that the aspects of that quite useful. As we've said, there is access to specialised legal, insurance, health and safety experts every step of the way. Insurance will be a big one, and something that I know that the businesses that I'm working with have grappled with and do need support, and how you articulate your risk assessment and your procedures and your mitigating measures and all those technical terms that your insurance company will want to talk to you about. So do check out the different help and support systems that are in operation. But thank you for joining us today and sticking with us through the webinar. Thank you enormously to Victoria from lovely sunny Donaghadee. It looks very bright there this afternoon. And thank you for giving us such really an uplifting webinar and actually putting a very positive slant on what is for some quite a daunting next few weeks. So thank you very, very much, and do check out the information. And thank you again, everybody, and we'll hope to see you at some of the other webinars. Thank you very much.